Leave the morphine, Chloe. She's unconscious anyway, and I can't exactly hit the slopes in Aspen with a pounding headache. My sister's voice drifted through the haze of my bedroom, sharp and cold as a shard of glass. Is she going to die, Dad? Chloe asked. There wasn't worry in her tone. Only a detached curiosity, the way a child asks if a bug will stop twitching after you pull off its wings. Eleanor? No, she's a Vance. My father's voice replied, booming and arrogant. She's sturdy. Besides, the surgeon said the recovery is only difficult. She's done her part. The company is saved, my reputation is intact, and now we deserve a drink. A very expensive, very cold drink. Let's go. The private jet leaves in an hour. The heavy oak door clicked shut with a finality that echoed in my bones. Silence rushed into the room like a flood of ice water. I opened my eyes. Every breath felt like a serrated knife was being dragged across my abdomen. 3 days ago, I had laid on a cold operating table and let them cut a vital piece of myself out to save the man who had just stolen my painkillers. I reached for the nightstand, my fingers trembling so hard they knocked over a glass of water. The amber bottle of opioids was gone. My wheelchair, which should have been at my bedside, had been pushed to the far corner of the room, intentionally out of reach. They hadn't just left me. They had trapped me in my own agony. I rolled off the bed, a guttural scream catching in my throat as my feet hit the floor. The pain was blinding, white-hot lightning that radiated from my surgical wound to my brain. I dragged myself across the hardwood, inch by inch, my fingernails digging into the gaps in the floorboards. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a wounded animal in a $5 million cage. When I finally reached my phone, the screen illuminated the darkness with a cruel, mocking glow. Instagram. Notification. @Chloe_Vance. Touchdown. Aspen. Daddy's recovery trip starts now. So blessed. #family first. #miracle recovery. #Vance Empire. The photo showed Chloe and my father, Harrison, clinking crystal flutes of champagne on the tarmac. Behind them was the Gulf Stream, the plane I paid for, the fuel I paid for, the lifestyle I had just bled for. I stared at the image until my eyes burned. For 34 years, I had been the reliable one, the risk assessor, the one who stayed late to fix the books while Chloe spent the inheritance on Birkin bags and Harrison chased his ego into the ground. When the federal auditors came knocking last month, Harrison didn't ask for my help. He demanded my sacrifice. He needed my personal guarantee and a massive transfer of my private assets to bridge the gap in the company's accounts. I gave it all. I thought, God, I was so stupid. I thought it would finally make him love me. I thought a kidney was the price of admission into a father's heart. I looked at my side, at the bandages beginning to seep crimson. I didn't cry. Tears are for people who still have hope. I had something better. I had the password. I pulled up the Vance Family Trust app. Harrison thought he was being clever when he made me the interim trustee before he went into surgery. He thought he was handing the keys to a doormat who would keep the lights on while he slept. He forgot one fundamental rule of risk assessment. Once you identify a threat, you neutralize it. I logged in. The balance stared back at me. $18,400,000. A notification popped up at the bottom of the screen. Pending transaction. The St. Regis Aspen Resort. $45,000. $45,000 for a welcome dinner. Caviar and vintage Krug while I was dragging my internal stitches across a floor in the Hamptons. My thumb hovered over the decline button. My heart hammered against my ribs Not from fear, but from a sudden, intoxicating rush of cold fury. Click. Reason for decline. Suspected fraud. I didn't stop there. I went into the travel portal and canceled their first-class return tickets. Then, I opened a high-end liquidator app. Chloe's pride and joy, her custom-ordered matte black G-Wagon, was titled to the trust. I sold it to a wholesaler at a 40% loss just to ensure it would be towed away within the hour. I used the instant funds to call an elite private medical team. "Vance residence," I rasped to the dispatcher. "I need a nurse and a security detail. Now." I leaned my head against the base of the bed, gasping as the pain flared. My phone began to vibrate. Transaction declined. Aspen Mountain Club. 2,000 miles away, the music had just stopped. The waiter was likely standing over my father, holding a black card that was now nothing more than a useless piece of plastic. "You wanted a miracle, Dad?" I whispered. "Wait until you see the plague I'm sending next." The hum of the IV drip was the only sound in the room, a rhythmic clicking that kept time with the throbbing in my side. Brenda, the nurse I'd hired, a woman with forearms like a weightlifter and a gaze that didn't take any nonsense, was adjusting my bandages. "You're lucky, Ms. Vance," she said, her voice a low gravel. "These stitches were ready to pop. Another hour of dragging yourself around, and you'd be back in the ER with a ruptured internal bleed." "I've survived worse," I whispered, though every word felt like swallowing glass. I closed my eyes, and the morphine the medical team provided finally began to dull the sharp edges of the physical pain. But as the physical agony receded, the memories rushed in to fill the void. The pain wasn't new. It was an old friend, a shadow that had followed me since I was a child. I was 12 years old again. The humid air of a New York July hung heavy in the back seat of my father's pristine Mercedes. My left arm was cradled against my chest, bent at a sickening angle that made my stomach churn every time we hit a pothole. I had fallen from the high beam during gymnastics practice. The school nurse had called Harrison 4 times before he finally showed up, looking more annoyed than concerned. "Dad, it really hurts," I had whimpered, tears streaking through the chalk dust on my face. "I think it's broken." Harrison didn't look back. He was checking his gold Rolex, his eyes fixed on the road. "Don't be dramatic, Eleanor. Pain is a mental state. If you acknowledge it, you give it power. We don't have time for the hospital right now. Chloe has her solo recital in 20 minutes. It's her big night. But Dad, enough," he snapped, his voice cutting through my plea like a whip. "Don't be selfish. The world doesn't stop just because you're hurting. Put on your cardigan so no one sees that arm. You will sit in the auditorium, you will be quiet, and you will clap for your sister." And so, I sat. For 3 hours, I sat in a velvet-cushioned seat, sweating through my clothes, watching Chloe twirl in a pink tutu under the stage lights. Every time the audience applauded, the vibration sent a fresh wave of agony through my fractured radius. I learned that night that in the Vance family, Chloe was the star, Harrison was the director, and I was merely the stagehand, expected to bleed in the wings so the show could go on. I opened my eyes, back in the present, my hand instinctively clutching the side where my kidney used to be. They had groomed me for this. My entire life was a training manual on how to endure silently. Harrison hadn't raised a daughter. He had cultivated an insurance policy. He had spent 34 years investing in my reliability so that when his own lifestyle finally rotted his organs, he had a matching set ready for harvest. 6 months ago, when the specialist sat us down in that sterile office and told us Harrison's kidneys were failing, he didn't look at me with fear or plea. He didn't even say please. He just looked across the mahogany desk, tapped his fingers, and said, "Well, Eleanor, it's a good thing we're the same blood type. We'll schedule the procedure for the week after the charity gala." It wasn't a request. It was a withdrawal from an account he thought he owned. He viewed my body as a warehouse of spare parts, a backup generator for his own failing engine. "Ms. Vance, your heart rate is spiking," Brenda said, leaning over me. "I'm fine," I gritted out, the fire in my chest hotter than the surgical site. "I'm just realizing that I've been waiting for a thank you that was never going to come. He doesn't see a person when he looks at me. He sees a transaction." I reached for my laptop, the screen reflecting the cold, hard light of my resolve. Harrison thought that teaching me to endure pain would make me compliant. He thought that breaking my spirit as a child would make me an obedient servant as an adult. He was wrong. He didn't make me weak. He made me unbreakable. "Brenda," I said, my voice steadying, "how long until I can sit up for more than an hour?" "With the meds I'm giving you, maybe 2 hours." "Why?" "Because," I said, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, "I have a lot of unauthorized transactions to report, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division usually starts their day at 8 a.m. The war wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the 34 years of silence. I was done being the audience for Chloe's recitals and the donor for Harrison's life." I began to type. If Harrison wanted to live so badly, I was going to make sure he lived long enough to see everything he built turn to ash. The morphine had carved out a hollow space where the pain used to be, leaving me with a terrifying, icy clarity. It was 3 a.m. in the Hamptons. The morphine had carved out a hollow space where the pain used to be, leaving me with a terrifying, icy clarity. It was 3 a.m. in the Hamptons. In Aspen, the party was crashing. "Brenda, bring me the black briefcase from the safe," I commanded. My voice was no longer a rasp. It was the tone I used when I dismantled hedge funds for breakfast. She hesitated, looking at my pale face. "You need rest, Eleanor." "I'll rest when they're bankrupt." "Bring the bag." As she set the heavy leather case on my lap, I felt the weight of my leverage. Inside weren't just bank statements. There was the shadow ledger. For years, as the family's risk assessor, I had noticed discrepancies in the Vance Foundation. Millions of dollars moving through shell companies in the Cayman Islands, disguised as charitable donations to medical research. Harrison wasn't just a failing patriarch. He was a failing criminal. I opened my laptop. The blue light washed over my face like a baptism. "Time for the first move," I whispered. I logged into the corporate server. Harrison had used my personal security clearance to bypass the two-factor authentication for the Foundation's offshore accounts. He thought he was hiding his tracks under my name. He thought if the ship sank, I'd be the one tied to the anchor. I began the cold calculus. Step 1. The luxury lockdown. I didn't just decline the Aspen transactions. I flagged the entire Vance family trust as compromised by internal theft. Within seconds, every credit card held by Harrison and Chloe turned into a useless sliver of plastic. No hotels, no private car services, no designer boutiques. I even revoked the digital access codes to the Aspen villa they were renting. Step 2. The asset liquidation. "Let's see how Chloe likes walking," I muttered. The notification pinged. The G-Wagon sale was finalized. $135,000 hit the escrow account. I immediately used that money to pay off the medical team and the 3 suit-clad security guards now patrolling my perimeter. Then, I turned my attention to the flight manifest. Harrison had booked a private return for Sunday. I didn't just cancel it. I blacklisted their names from the private terminal's carrier service, citing financial irregularity. They were now stranded in a ski resort town during peak season with no money and no way to fly private. To get home, they'd have to beg for a bus ticket. Step 3. The scorched earth. This was the masterpiece. I pulled up the black ledger files. Harrison had been running a sophisticated Ponzi scheme, using the foundation's medical miracle grants to pay off his gambling debts and Chloe's exorbitant lifestyle. He had stolen from cancer patients to buy champagne. I drafted an encrypted email to special.agent.vance@fbi.gov. No relation, a bitter irony. Subject: The Vance Foundation. Evidence of racketeering and federal fraud. Attached: 4.2 gigabytes of ledger scans, wire transfer receipts, and internal memos. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. Once I clicked this, I wasn't just a daughter getting revenge. I was a whistleblower dismantling an empire. I was destroying the name I carried. "You gave him your kidney, Eleanor," I whispered to myself, staring at my reflection in the dark window. "And he used it to walk away from you while you bled. He doesn't deserve the life you saved." The silence of the Hamptons estate was shattered 12 hours later, not by the gentle hum of a returning limousine, but by the violent, splintering crash of the front mahogany doors. I was sitting in my wheelchair in the foyer, the IV drip clicking rhythmically beside me like a countdown. Brenda stood like a sentinel to my left, while 2 of the security guards I'd hired moved into defensive positions. I wasn't the trembling girl they had left on the floor. I was a queen on a chrome throne, waiting for the barbarians to breach the gate. Harrison marched in first. He looked like a ghost of the man who had flown out on a private jet. His expensive ski jacket was stained with travel grime. His silver hair was disheveled, and his face was a terrifying shade of mottled purple. He looked like he'd spent the last 10 hours arguing with bus drivers and sleeping in airport terminals. Chloe followed, shivering in a thin cashmere sweater, her eyes wild and bloodshot. They hadn't come to apologize. They had come to collect. "You ungrateful, psychotic bitch!" Chloe screamed, lunging toward me. One of my guards, a man named Marcus, who looked like he could headbutt a brick wall, stepped forward. Chloe recoiled, her face twisting in shock. "Do you have any idea what you did? They towed my car. They threw us out of the resort like common vagrants. I had to sell my Cartier watch just to get us a flight to JFK." "It was a beautiful watch, Chloe," I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through her hysteria. "But you were always terrible at time management. You spent too much of it being a parasite." Harrison stepped around her, his eyes fixed on me with a cold, wet rage that made the hair on my arms stand up. He didn't scream. He used the voice he used when he was about to fire 1,000 employees. "You think you're in charge, Eleanor?" he asked softly, leaning over my wheelchair. "You think because you held the pen for 5 minutes, you own the ink? You've had a mental breakdown. The surgery, the meds. You're unstable." He straightened up and motioned to the open doorway. 2 uniformed local police officers stepped into the foyer. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my hands folded in my lap. "Officers," Harrison said, his voice instantly shifting into the trembling, heartbroken tone of a victim. "That's her, my daughter. She waited until I was under anesthesia for life-saving surgery to hack the family accounts and steal millions. She's an addict, she's delusional, and she's dangerous. I want her removed for her own safety, and I want my property back." The officers looked at me. I was pale, hooked up to an IV and surrounded by pill bottles. To them, I didn't look like a whistleblower. I looked like a junkie daughter who had robbed her elderly, sick father. Ma'am, we're going to need you to step away from the medical equipment and come with us, the taller officer said, reaching for his cuffs. I am the legal interim trustee, I said, my voice rasping but firm. I have the papers right here. My father is under investigation for federal— Save it for the station, the officer snapped. Harrison had used the Elder Financial Abuse card, a nuclear option in this zip code. As they pulled my arms behind my back, the metal cuffs bit into my skin, sending white-hot lightning through my surgical wound. I gasped, tears finally leaking from my eyes. Harrison leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale coffee and malice. The FBI doesn't care about a ledger that doesn't exist, Eleanor, he whispered so only I could hear. Chloe, went to your office while I called the cops. Your laptop, the safe, it's all gone. Ashes and melted plastic. You have He reached out and patted the side of my body where my kidney used to be. A small, satisfied smirk crossed his face. Thanks for the organ, Ellie. I'll think of you every time I take a leak in my new penthouse. As they dragged me toward the squad car, Chloe waved from the porch, holding my house keys. Don't worry, sis. We'll take real good care of your stuff while you're in lockup. The door of the cruiser slammed shut. I was bleeding, cuffed, and alone, while the man living off my body settled into my home. But as the car pulled away, I looked at the hidden camera I'd installed in the foyer crown molding. Harrison thought he had destroyed the evidence. He forgot that a risk assessor always keeps a backup in the cloud. The back of a police cruiser is a tomb designed for the living. It is hard plastic, cold metal, and the smell of stale fear. Every time the car hit a pothole on the way to the station, the shockwave detonated in my side. I bit my lip until I tasted copper, refusing to give the officers the satisfaction of a groan. I had been training for this silence my entire life. In the interrogation room, the air was thick. Detective, step away from the table, the lead agent commanded. He looked at me and nodded once. Ms. Vance, I'm Special Agent Miller, FBI. We received your transmission. At that moment, Harrison and Chloe were led into the hallway in handcuffs. They had been arrested in the lobby of the station, thinking they were there to watch my downfall. Harrison's face was a mask of pure horror. When he saw me through the glass, his mouth moved like a fish out of water. I signaled for the agent to open the door. I rolled my wheelchair out into the hall. The pain was still there, but for the first time in 34 years, I felt light. You destroyed everything, Harrison roared, his voice cracking. The family, the legacy. For what? A few millions? No, Dad, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I didn't do it for the money. I did it because you told me the world doesn't stop just because someone is hurting. I finally believed you. I leaned in close to him, my voice dropping to a cold, lethal whisper. I planted life inside you, Dad. I gave you my kidney so you could stay healthy enough to stand trial. I wanted to make sure you lived long enough to watch the walls of a prison cell close in on you. Dead men don't pay restitution, but you're going to pay for every second of my silence. Eleanor, please, Chloe sobbed, her expensive sweater torn. We're family. Family is a bond of blood, Chloe, I said, turning my back on them. You two are just a bad debt I've finally written off. An hour later, I was back in a private ambulance heading to a real hospital where I would actually be cared for. I looked out the window at the sunrise over the Atlantic. The scar on my side would remain, a jagged, silver reminder of what I had lost. But as I watched the police station vanish in the rearview mirror, I realized it wasn't a wound anymore. It was a receipt. The price of my freedom had been a kidney and a name, and for the first time in my life, I knew I had finally gotten the better end of the deal. I closed my eyes and let the sleep finally come. The star was gone. The stagehand was finally free. Stop letting your kindness be someone else's doormat. Family is important, but if they only treat you like a spare part, set your boundaries. You deserve to be valued, not used. Thanks for watching. If this story hit home, hit like and drop a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe for more intense stories coming soon. See you in the next one.